Chapter 9. The hinges groaned heavily in protest after years of disuse, and then the smell hit us. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. A thick, rancid stench of rot, decay, and something else, something far worse. It was like the air had been trapped behind that door for centuries, festering in the dark. It hit me like a wall, the sickening stench filling my lungs, and I gagged, stumbling back. I could hear Lila choke beside me, covering her mouth and nose with her sleeve. Darwin turned away, his face pale. "Oh, God," he gasped, his voice shaking. "What the hell is that?" The air that poured out from behind the door was thick and humid, like the inside of a rotting tomb. It was the smell of death, of something long dead and left to fester. It filled the cellar, clinging to our clothes, our skin. My stomach twisted, and for a moment I thought I might be sick. No one moved. We all stood there, staring into the blackness beyond the door, the vile smell wrapping around us like a shroud. Jack, undeterred, lifted his torch and cast its beam into the doorway, illuminating what lay beyond. A single staircase going into a tight passageway, the stone walls rough and uneven, slick with moisture and covered in patches of dark green moss. Cobwebs hung from every corner, thick and heavy with dust, swaying slightly as if disturbed by our presence. The steps themselves were worn and cracked, each one a darker shade of gray than the last, as if time had swallowed the color from this place. The narrow descent led deeper than any of us had imagined, the bottom of the staircase lost to the shadows. The torch barely reached more than a few feet ahead, leaving the rest of the tunnel hidden in thick, impenetrable darkness. The walls felt like they were pressing in, damp and cold to the touch. The scent of movement, and something far worse, lingered with each breath. Darwin's voice broke the silence, his words shaky, unsure. "If there was a girl down there, wouldn't she have said something by now?" His flashlight flickered nervously against the stones, reflecting off the wet surface. Lila, her face pale in the dim light, shifted uncomfortably. Maybe there's nothing down there." She didn't sound convinced, her own fear leaking into her words. I swallowed, my throat dry as the weight of this place pressed down on us. Each instinct in me screamed to turn back, but Jack stood firm at the top of the stairs, eyes fixed on the darkness below, as if daring it to give up its secrets. Without warning, Jack called out, his voice echoing down the staircase. "Are you down there, sweetheart?" His voice ricocheted off the cold stone walls, traveling deeper than I thought possible. For a moment, nothing responded but the muffled echo of his own voice. We all stood still, holding our breath, waiting. Then came the sound, a faint voice, so distant, it was almost a whisper, but it was there.
"Daddy? Daddy? Is that you?"
I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. It was the voice of a child, fragile and weak, like it hadn't been used in years. It echoed eerily in the narrow stairwell, carried up from the depths. My heart pounded in my chest as the voice lingered, but it was Jack who went stiff, his body freezing as he stood there in disbelief. I turned to look at him. His face had gone pale. The color drained completely as his eyes widened in shock. He didn't blink, didn't move. He just stood there, staring down into the dark. I could see the tremor in his hands, the light from his torch shaking as he held it. "Jack," I whispered, I'm sure of what was happening. "What is it?" Jack's lips parted, but no words came at first. Then, his voice cracked, barely more than a whisper. That's my son." The blood drained from my face, and I could see the same disbelief mirrored in Darwin and Lila's expression. How could that be possible? We all knew his story, knew that his boy had been taken over half a year ago, his fate unknown. But that voice, it didn't make sense. My skin prickled with a deep unease. But Jack was already gone, lost in the moment. Jacob? He called out, his voice trembling, the name bursting from him as though he'd been holding it back for years. The voice came again, weaker this time.
Daddy, please help me. Help us.
Something wasn't right. The tone was off. The way the words drifted up the stairs like a dying wind, barely there. But Jack didn't hear it. His face changed. Something clicked inside him. Fatherly instinct kicked in, and in that moment, he believed. Jacob, hold on. Daddy's coming, just sit tight. Jack's voice cracked again as he surged forward, his torch bouncing wildly in his hand. I'm coming. He shoved past us, the desperation in his voice so raw it sent a shockwave of panic through me. He even dropped his shotgun. Jack, wait. Something's not right. I called after him, but he didn't stop. He barreled down the stairs, each step echoing through the narrow passage as he descended into the dark, his shadow dancing on the walls. Jack, don't, Darwin yelled, but it was no use. The sound of his boots grew fainter with each second, swallowed by the black oblivion. The silence down there was suffocating, pressing against my ears as I strained to hear something, anything, coming from the pitch-black void below. Jack had disappeared into the dark, his footsteps swallowed by the cellar's gaping maw. My flashlight barely cut through the thick gloom. It's been flickering weakly along the slick stone walls. The wretched air stunk of wet moss and decay, the kind of foulness that seeped into your skin, lingering like a specter in a graveyard. Jack? Lyda's voice quivered as she called out. No response. I couldn't see him anymore, couldn't even hear him. He was gone. My throat felt tight, my pulse thudding in my ears as I gripped my flashlight tighter. The light ahead of us was dying against the overwhelming darkness. He's too far down, I muttered, mostly to myself, but I could see the others glancing my way, their faces pale, shadows dancing across their skin. Darwin shuffled nervously beside me. What now? We can't just leave him down there. His voice was shaking. We shouldn't have let him go alone, Lila snapped, her eyes wide, darting between the dark opening and us. We have to go after him. I shook my head, trying to fight the knot of dread tightening in my chest. This had turned into a nightmare. Maybe he's found the kids, and he's bringing them back up, she added weakly. But even she didn't sound like she believed her own words. I couldn't help it. My gut twisted with something darker, something more sinister that I couldn't quite shake. I doubt it, I said quietly. Darwin shot me a look, frowning. You really think so? His voice was more accusatory than concerned. I turned towards him, scanning the walls, the dripping moisture, the ancient stone slick with mold. The smell here wasn't just rot. It was something worse, something unnatural. Just look at this place, Darwin. I gestured toward the wet stone walls, the creeping moss, the air so damp and heavy you could almost choke on it. This stench. No one could survive down here for long. If those kids down there, if they are there, then they're... My words caught in my throat, but I forced them out. They're probably dead. Lila winced, and Darwin glared at me, his lips pressed tight, but I didn't care. I had to say it. This place wasn't right. None of it was. We fell silent again, all of us staring down the staircase into the dark, listening. The air around us felt thick, heavy with tension, but the cellar itself was a leaving, breathing entity. Then there was a noise, a faint sound from deep below. I stiffened, my breath catching. It was distant, barely audible, but there it was again. A scraping sound. Something was moving around down there. "Did you hear that?" Lila whispered, her voice barely a breath. I nodded, my pulse quickening. The noise grew louder, more distinct. A low groan. Jack's voice. It was far away, but unmistakable, like he was struggling, or in pain. "Jack?" Darwin called, his voice wavering, echoing off the stone walls. Another thud, then another groan, louder now, more desperate. My blood ran cold. I knew that sound. Jack was in trouble. "Jack!" I shouted, but all I got in return was more distant scrambling, like he was silently fighting something we couldn't see. Without thinking, I stepped toward the staircase, my heart racing. "I'm going after him." Darwin's arm shot out, blocking my path. "Wait," he hissed, his face pale as a ghost. "Listen." We stood frozen, listening. The cellar fell into an eerie, deathly silence, and for a second, I thought maybe we were imagining it. Maybe Jack was fine. Maybe this whole thing was in our heads. For a moment, it felt unreal. The pitch-black tunnel stretched out before us, the darkness swallowing everything. No sound, no movement. It was so still that it almost seemed like time itself had frozen, leaving us trapped in some terrible walking nightmare. I found myself gripping the flashlight harder, my knuckles white, and my mind raced through a desperate list of explanations. Maybe we were imagining things. Maybe Jack was fine. Maybe this whole place, this stinking, oppressive cellar, was just warping our senses. The darkness, the silence, that played tricks. It was so quiet, so completely devoid of life, but the entire situation felt surreal. "Maybe I'll wake up any second now," I told myself. "Maybe none of this is real." I held on to that thought with everything I had, praying that at any moment I'd snap out of this nightmare, open my eyes, and find myself anywhere but here. Then it came. Jack's scream exploded out of the darkness, tearing through the silence like a serrated blade. It wasn't just a scream. It was something truly prime, gut-wrenching, the kind of sound you hear when someone is being forced into unimaginable pain, fighting for their life. It was full of raw, animalistic terror, and it hit me like a punch to the guts. Any illusion I had of waking up from this nightmare shattered in an instant. This was real. The sound that came from Jack went beyond human. It was too filled with agony, too soaked in fear. It echoed off the stone walls, bouncing back at us from every angle, turning the cellar into a horrifying chamber of terror. His scream pierced through me, a blood-curdling howl that reached into my chest and squeezed, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My entire body locked up as the sound ripped through the air, so loud and so primal that it felt like the walls themselves were screaming with him. My skin crawled, every nerve ending alive with dread.
"No. Get out of..."
His cries for help were cut off with a loud, sickening crunch. My stomach dropped. The sound echoed, bouncing off the walls like a death knell, wet, thick. The unmistakable sound of bone and flesh giving way to something. It echoed in the pit of my stomach, making me want to retch, my body going cold as I stood there paralyzed by the horror of it all. "Jack!" Lila screamed, stepping forward, but I grabbed her arm, pulling her back. We could only stare into the blackness, helpless, as the noises below turned into something worse. something grotesque. The faint, wet, squelching sound that followed, the unmistakable sound of flesh tearing, turned my blood to ice. The fear was unlike anything I'd ever felt. My entire body was paralyzed in place. I stood there, staring into the black abyss at the bottom of the staircase, every muscle in my body rigid, my mind racing but unable to command my legs to move. It was as if my limbs had turned to stone, frozen by the sheer horror of whatever was happening below. None of us moved. None of us breathed. We were trapped, prisoners to the terror that held us captive. The sound drifted up the staircase like something alive, crawling its way into my ears, into my head. It was faint but unmistakable, the wet, rancid squelching of something ripping into flesh. The noise echoed up the stairs from the darkness, bouncing off the walls like a sick, twisted symphony. It was unmistakable. Something was feeding down there. The realization sent ice flooding into my veins. My stomach churned, my mouth dry with the taste of bile rising up my throat. Beside me, I could hear Lila starting to cry. The faint, broken sobs barely made a sound over the steady, nauseating rhythm of that wet squelching. But I heard it. I turned my head slightly and saw her, pale as a ghost, standing rigid. Her eyes were wide, her face streaked with silent tears. Her hand clamped over her mouth as if she was trying to hold back a scream or the urge to vomit. She looked like a statue of grief and terror, unable to comprehend the nightmare unfolding around us. I wanted to say something to her, to tell her it would be okay, to tell her anything that might cut through the soul-crushing sound that was keeping us frozen. But I couldn't. Words wouldn't come. All I could do was stand there, staring into the black, my heart hammering in my chest. And then the sound stopped. It didn't fade. It didn't slow. It just stopped. The wet, disgusting noises that had haunted us for what felt like hours, the sounds of something eating flesh, gone in an instant. The silence that followed wasn't just eerie, it was reprehensible, thick, as though the air itself had frozen along with us. The cellar had been dead silent before, but now it was as though every ounce of life, every tiny sound had been sucked out of the room. The quiet was deafening, a black hole of sound that swallowed everything. It stretched on, heavy and suffocating, pressing in on us like a weight we couldn't escape. I could hear Lila's shaky breaths, see Darwin's pale face twisted with dread. But none of us moved. None of us dared to. My own heart pounded so hard I could hear it echoing in my ears, my mind racing to comprehend the horror that was unfolding before us. But then, a sound. Faint at first, barely audible, a voice muttering something, just a whisper in the dark, coming from somewhere down the staircase, so distant I wasn't sure if I was imagining it. But as I strained to listen, they grew louder. Still too quiet to make out, but there was a rhythm to it, a phrase, a sentence. It repeated itself again and again, growing stronger, more distinct each time it came.
Jack is no more.
The words were a child's voice, soft, eerie, but clear now. My body stiffened as I realized what it was saying, the horror of it sinking into my bones. The words continued to echo up from the black depths, repeating over and over, like some sick, broken record.
Jack is no more. Jack.
Is no more.
At first it was the boy's voice, that same hollow voice from earlier, but as it repeated the phrase, something about it changed. Every time the words came, the voice grew darker, more twisted. The innocent tone began to fade, replaced by something deeper, croakier. The words laced with an unnatural brash that sent a shiver down my spine.
Jack is no more.
Louder, deeper. With every repetition, the voice lost its humanity. It shifted, morphed into something monstrous, as if whatever was down there was shedding its disguise. The boy's voice was gone now, replaced by something far more grotesque, a low, guttural croak, twisted with malice. The words didn't just echo anymore. They crawled up the stairs, slithering into our ears, into our minds.
Jack is no more.
The voice snarled, now a hideous, inhuman growl, a sound that should not exist. My body froze, every nerve screaming to run, to flee, but I was too rooted to the spot by the sheer terror of it. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the voice stopped. 1 a.m., silence, absolute and complete. The silence was deafening, far worse than before, like we were suspended in a void where nothing moved, nothing existed, until the faintest sound broke through. A noise so distant I almost didn't register it, but it was there, creeping up from the black moor of the staircase. Quiet, scuttling. It grew louder. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as the sound crawled. At first, I couldn't place it, couldn't make sense of what it was, but the sound was unmistakable. Something was moving around. The scuttling became frantic, erratic, a skittering noise like a spider running across a wooden floor. And then it hit me. Whatever it was crawling up the stairs, fast. Oh God, Lila whispered, a voice barely audible through the rising panic. I could feel the terror booming in my chest, swelling until it felt like I was drowning in it. I looked at Darwin, his face as white as a sheet, his eyes wide with pure, unfiltered terror. The scuttling was getting louder, closer. Something was coming straight for us. Darwin's voice broke through the terror. Run! Instinct took over. My legs kicked into motion, but not before I slammed the stone door shut, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the handle. The scuttling was nearly upon us, the sound so close it felt like it was right at our heels. I didn't dare look back. We bolted up the spiral stairs, the stone cold beneath our feet as we ran for our lives. Behind us, the door, the heavy chained door that I had just shut, exploded open with a booming crack that echoed through the cellar. Whatever was down there was strong, inhumanly strong, and it was fast. Faster than anything I'd ever heard. The scraping of what sounded like claws or nails on stone was a deafening echo now, growing closer with every second. As though whatever this was running on all fours, charging on us with a speed that defied reason. Go, go, go! I shouted, my voice strained with panic as we tore up the stairs, each step a frantic attempt to outrun the terror that was clawing its way behind us. The walls of the staircase blurred as I sprinted, my breath ragged and burning in my chest. And then, as we burst out of the cellar into the house, I heard it, a blood-curdling scream. The scream of a little girl, high-pitched and shrill, echoing through the walls like a dagger in the dark. It was the same girl's voice I'd heard before. Whatever this thing was had been mimicking a young girl to lure us here. But now, there was no mistaking it for a cry for help. That scream was no child's. It was something else, something far worse, something pretending to be a child, mocking us, hunting us. The house reverberated with the sound, but none of us looked back. None of us dared. We bolted through the wooden door, the scream still echoing behind us, and we ran as fast as we humanly could, knowing that whatever was chasing us was no longer trying to lure us in. It was coming for us. We stumbled out of the house and practically threw ourselves into the car, gasping for air like we'd just surfaced from drowning. The reek of that hellish stench clung to us, and I couldn't shake the fear of it, as if it had seeped into my skin. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the keys trying to shove them into the ignition. My chest felt like it was in a vice, but I forced myself to breathe, in and out, in and out. As I twisted the key, Lila was sobbing in the passenger seat, one hand clamped tight over her mouth, her eyes wide and staring ahead like she was seeing something that would be burned into her memory forever. Darwin, in the back, looked hollowed out, his face drained of all color, his lips moving soundlessly as if he was praying or talking to himself. I turned the key, my whole body coiled, dreading that maybe that foul creature, whatever it was, would come slamming out of the fog. But there was nothing, just silence. I glanced back through the rear windshield, fully expecting to see it barreling toward us from the house, but the fog had thickened, swallowing the trees and the road in a murky gray shroud. "Where's it gone?" I whispered, more to myself than anyone else, but the words just slipped out in the silence. "Does it matter?" Lila's voice was raw and trembling, but she was braver than I was right then. "Just fucking drive." I didn't need to be told twice. I stomped on the gas, the car leaping forward, tires slipping slightly on the dirt before catching. We shot down the narrow forest road, the headlights barely cutting through the fog, making everything feel even closer, more claustrophobic. The forest seemed to close in on us from all sides, the dark shapes of the pines looming like silent watchers, and every shadow that flickered in the fog looked like it was moving, following. Lila was mumbling something next to me, her voice fractured by sobs. "We shouldn't have come. We shouldn't have come. God, I can't believe Jack, he's gone. He's just gone. Shut up. Please just shut up." Darwin whispered from the back, his voice on the verge of breaking. "We're going to get out of here. We're going to be fine. We're fine." But I could hear the crack in his voice, could feel the desperation clinging to each word. He wasn't reassuring anyone, least of all himself. My fingers were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, every instinct in me screaming to go faster, to outrun whatever horror was lurking just behind us. I tried to focus on the road, on the escape, but those words echoed in my head like a sick taunt. "Jack is no more." Even as we sped away, tearing down the dirt road, away from that hellish cellar, those words stuck to me, dug in deep. That voice, the way it had shifted, growing from the soft, innocent lilt of a child into something monstrous and had scarred itself into my memory. I knew it would be there forever, in the back of my mind. A silence settled over the car, but it was far from calm. Darwin had gone completely still, his usual muttering gone, replaced by a rigid, hollow stare. Lila sat beside me, her skin drained to a ghostly pale, her wide eyes fixed forward as though hoping to erase everything by not looking back. In that silence, the weight of what we had just left behind was really starting to set in. We were alive, but we all felt dead, trapped in the echo of that monstrous voice, in the memory of Jack's screams. And then, barely audible over the hum of the engine, came a sound that made my skin crawl. A faint scratch, soft, subtle, but unmistakable, almost like nails grazing against a metallic surface. At first, I thought it might just be the car. We'd been tearing through the forest road at top speed, gravel spitting up against the frame. But then it came again, sharp and intentional, a scraping noise that seemed to crawl up from beneath us. Did you hear that?" Lila whispered, breaking the silence. Her voice was a faint thread, barely holding on. "Yeah," I said, my heart pounding. What is that?" It was quiet again. The road stretched ahead, lined with shadows cast by fog-draped trees. The fog had swallowed up the headlights and turning everything outside into a murky blur. Every 30 seconds or so, that scratching noise would come back, like something against metal, trying to find a hold. Lila glanced over her shoulder, her face drawn and haunted. But there was nothing in the car. We couldn't see anything but darkness and fog. As the silence grew heavy again, I tried to convince myself that it was just the road, just stray rocks and branches brushing up against the car. But each time the sound returned, it seemed closer, like something was slowly, deliberately moving. And then, out of nowhere, I heard it again. Not my memory, not in my thoughts, but in my ear, as if something was whispering from the seat beside me.
Jack is no more.
My blood went cold, every nerve in my body screaming to get out, to do anything but be here, trapped in this car with that voice echoing inside my skull. But something worse was settling in, a deep, crawling dread, the sense that something was watching us, that this thing hadn't just vanished into the fog. It was here in the car with us.
Jack is no more.
It was a whisper, low and guttural, slithering into my mind like a sickness, cold. The words seemed to sink into my soul, filling me with a dread that felt inescapable. And then, as that whisper echoed in my head, the stench returned, thick and choking, a smell that seeped into every corner of the car. The scent was unmistakable. The smell of rot, something that had been decaying for weeks, mixed with the sour tang of damp earth and warm blood. The odor was so strong that my stomach lurched and bile rose in my throat. I could see Lydia pressing her hand over her nose and mouth, her eyes watering as she fought not to gag. Darwin sat rigid in the back, his face pale and frozen as he stared straight ahead, afraid to look anywhere else. My eyes drifted forward, locked onto the road, trying to resist the overwhelming pull of the rearview mirror. I knew that, whatever my mind was telling me, whatever instinct I had, there was no good that would come of it. But it was like something beyond my own control was nudging me, pushing me to look back. My stomach twisted and I fought it, every instinct telling me to keep my eyes on the road, to floor the gas, to get out of here as fast as possible. But the urge grew stronger, insistent, a clawing voice at the edge of my mind, demanding I look through the rearview mirror, just once. Finally, slowly, I forced myself to glance at the rearview mirror. And as I did, my heart seized. As my gaze drifted to the rearview mirror, I felt everything inside me die, as though the blood in my veins had turned to ice. What I saw, it shouldn't have existed, not in this world, not in any world that I knew. It was something born from the darkest layer of hell, a sight that clawed at the edges of my mind with a force that felt like it could tear my sanity apart. Every instinct screamed at me to look away, to unsee it, but I couldn't. I was trapped, held by the horror of what I was staring at. What looked back at me was a face, but I don't even know if I could call it that. It wasn't really a face, not like anything I'd ever seen before. It was a twisted, grotesque parody of one, something wearing the mask of a man but far from it. Its skin was tight, stretched over a bony skull like old leather, gray and decayed. The veins underneath pulsed faintly, as if whatever it was, it barely held on to life. Maybe it had moved beyond life into something worse. But the mouth, that's where the horror really was. It had no lips. Everything around its maw was torn away into a permanent, blood-soaked grin, exposing rows upon rows of jagged, uneven fangs. They weren't just sharp. They looked like they'd been used, worn down from tearing through flesh. Bits of blackened, rotting tissue clung between its teeth, and I swear I could see small chunks of something fresh. It had fed recently. The thing's jaw hung open in a way that was impossibly wide, like its entire lower face could unhinge. Where the skin should have met, it was torn, exposing raw muscle and bone, glistening with some dark, viscous liquid. It drooled like a dog, black and thick, dripping down in slow, deliberate drops that hit the surface of the car. The smell of death, of something long rotted and putrid, filled the car so heavily I almost gagged. And its eyes, they were the worst. Those glowing, icy blue orbs were sunk deep into hollow sockets, but they burned with an unnatural, predatory hunger, not like the glow of life, but the cold, calculating gaze of something completely opposite. They fixed on me through the mirror, like they were looking straight into my soul, peeling away layers of my mind, feeding on my fear. It was anything but human. It was something old, something unequivocally evil. That face, it was the embodiment of everything you dread but can't name. A creature that looked like it had crawled out of the darkest corners of hell. An entity that enjoyed what it did, that took pleasure in every scream, every ounce of suffering it caused. My heart slammed against my ribs, my mind screaming at me to do something, but I couldn't move. My body was locked in place. Lila gasped beside me. It wasn't the kind of gasp you hear when someone's surprised. No. This was the kind of sound someone makes when they're seconds away from screaming, when the fear hits so fast they can barely breathe, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw both her hands cover her mouth, her eyes speaking 1,000 words, and I'm sure I could resonate with all of them. Darwin let out this choked animal-like sound, the kind of noise someone makes when they've lost all control. He was shaking, hands clawing at the seatbelt, but neither of them could tear their eyes away from the rearview mirror. I could see the creature's arms reach across from the back of the car, its rotting skeletal fingers scraping against the windows. It shouldn't have been able to reach that far. Nothing should. But it was like some kind of horrible arachnid with limbs that bent in ways that weren't natural. Its elongated hands slammed against the side of the car, right near my door, fingers long and twisted, ending in horrible serrated talons that could rend flesh from bone in one swipe. They scraped along the windows as it pulled itself up, moving with this jerky, insect-like motion that would haunt me forever. The worst part wasn't watching it move. It was the sound, the scraping of its claws against the metal, like nails on a troop, but deeper, guttural. It was the kind of noise that crawled under my skin and settled in my veins. Lila's voice broke through the noise, barely a whisper, trembling. What the hell is that? But no one answered. How could we? I couldn't see it anymore. It was on the roof. I felt it there. We all did. This thing can't have weighed much, as it wasn't weighing down the car, on the roof in any way. I could hear its claws clicking on the metal, shifting, waiting. My mind was racing. There was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide from this thing. Darwin had his face in his hands, muttering something under his breath, and Lila was trying not to sob, trying to keep it together. But I knew none of us would last much longer. For a brief second, I thought maybe, just maybe, if we stayed quiet, it would leave. Maybe it wouldn't notice us, or it wouldn't care. But that hope disappeared as fast as it came. A loud, jarring thud shook the roof, and I flinched. Then came a looting. It was like the creature was testing the roof, feeling for weakness. I could hear its claws dragging across the metal, slow at first, then faster, tearing at the roof like it was nothing. The screech was unbearable. Like metal tearing through metal, the sound reverberated through the car and through me. Lila was losing it now, her voice high-pitched, panicked. "What do we do? What the fuck do we do?" Darwin was screaming too. I couldn't think straight. My grip on the wheel tightened, my hands turning white, and I just reacted. I yanked the wheel hard, swerving left, then right, trying to throw the thing off. The tires squealed, and the car lurched violently. But the creature stayed glued to us, its weight shifting with the car, moving like it was part of the damn thing. I could hear its claws puncturing the roof, the metal caving in. Every thud, every slash felt like it was getting closer, like any second those claws would break through. I swerved again, harder this time, trying anything to get it off. The whole car rattled as the creature clung to the roof. The sound it made was something beyond the scope of anything I'd ever heard, something that ripped through the air and tore straight into the marrow of my bones. At first, it was just this low, croaky rumble, a sound that felt too wrong to belong to anything from this world. It was wet, like the sound of thick mud sloshing underfoot, but buried in it was the sickening guttural crackle, as if its lungs were filled with bile and rot. Every breath it took shook the car slightly, vibrating through the metal, like its entire body was humming with a force that defied nature. Then, when I swerved the car hard, hoping to shake it loose, the creature let out a scream that I will never forget. It was a screeching, high-pitched wail, so sharp and piercing that it seemed to stab into my skull. The noise started deep in its throat, but then it rose, turning from a low growl into something higher and shriller, its pitch climbing until it felt like it was about to split my head in two. It wasn't just a scream. It was like dozens of voices, all twisted and garbled together, clashing in a chaos sound that had no pattern or reason. It was as if the creature was filled with an army of trapped souls, each one fighting to scream louder than the other, the air around us vibrating with a discordant, nightmarish wail. It was the sound of something so vile and forgotten, screaming into the void with all its hatred, all its hunger, and all its malice. It echoed inside the car, bouncing off the wheels, filling the space so completely that I thought my ears might bleed from the pressure. There was this unholy quality to it. Something not just monstrous, but pure evil on a primal level. It was the sound of pure madness, a sound that made my whole body want to curl in on itself. The roof was now caving in. The thing's claws were tearing through the metal like it was nothing, screeching as they cut deeper and deeper. I could hear Lila sobbing next to me, her breath coming out in ragged gasps, and Darwin had completely lost it, screaming like a man possessed. The car was shaking, rattling as I swerved again, desperately trying to shake this thing off, but it wouldn't budge. It clung to the roof like it was part of the car, its long, spindly, stretching impossibly far, reaching forward as if it could tear its way through from above and snatch us. I couldn't think. Every time I glanced up, I saw another hole, more moonlight breaking through where its claws had pierced the metal. It was too strong. It was going to tear through, and we bayed helpless. I was losing it, my hands slipping on the wheel, slick with sweat. There was no way out, no way to outrun this thing. The smell was so overwhelming, the stench of rotten death filling the car, suffocating us. I was starting to accept it, that this was it, that this was how we'd die. But then something flickered in the back of my mind. An idea, stupid maybe, but it was all I had. I straightened the car, my knuckles white as I gripped the wheel, and my foot pressed harder on the gas. The engine roared beneath us as I floored it, speeding as fast as the car could go. "Hold on," I shouted, barely hearing my own voice, over the sound of the creature's claws scraping on the roof. "Brace yourselves," Lila gasped, but I couldn't look at her. I had to time this right. The road blurred past, the fog thickening, and then, now, I slammed my foot down on the brake hard, the tires screeching, the whole car lurching violently as it came to a dead stop. The force threw us all off forward, seatbelts digging into our chests, and I prayed this would work. For a split second, there was silence, save for our gasps. Then I heard it, the sound of the creature being launched off the roof. I could hear it, the awful metallic shriek of its claws scraping against the roof as it lost its grip. There was this sharp, terrible thud as it hit the ground, followed by the sickening sound of its body reeling across the road, bones and limbs cracking in ways that shouldn't have been possible. And then, just like that, it was thrown into the fog.